James had always believed that patience was his greatest strength, but the night Anna shouted at him to leave proved how fragile patience could be. The argument had started over something small, a misplaced bill, a careless remark, but it grew into a storm that shook every wall in the house. Anna's voice echoed through the living room, sharp and unforgiving, as she pointed at the door and told him he no longer belonged there. James did not argue. He simply looked at her for a long moment and then stepped outside into the cold night air. The silence of the street was a sharp contrast to the chaos inside the house, and James leaned against his car trying to steady himself. He could have driven away in anger, but instead he sat quietly thinking about what had just happened. As the minutes passed, his mind turned to the one detail Anna had completely forgotten. Months earlier she had signed a stack of papers trusting him to handle the details of their property without asking many questions. She had been distracted that day, rushing to a meeting, and barely glanced at the documents before putting her signature at the bottom of each page. James had handled everything carefully, making sure the ownership of the house rested solely in his name. Now, as he sat in the car replaying the memory, he felt a strange calmness wash over him. Anna believed she had thrown him out, but the truth was that she had no legal claim to the house at all. James opened the glove compartment, pulled out the folder of papers, and checked the title once more. There it was in black and white, his name alone printed on the deed. He leaned back in his seat, and for the first time since the argument, he allowed himself a quiet smile. The house she had used to wound him with her words was never truly hers to command. The next morning James returned, not with anger, but with quiet determination. Anna stood at the front door, surprised to see him so soon, and even more surprised by the calm expression on his face. She started to speak, but he raised the folder in his hand and simply asked her to look. Confusion turned to disbelief as she flipped through the documents, recognizing her own signature on every page. Her voice faltered as she demanded to know how this could be possible, but the truth was undeniable. Neighbors who had noticed the commotion began to gather, watching curiously as the scene unfolded. James remained steady, never raising his voice, simply explaining that she had signed away her rights months ago. Anna's face grew pale as the realization settled that she had lost the home without even knowing it. The very walls she had claimed as her own were legally under his control. She tried to argue, but every word felt hollow against the weight of the papers in his hand. James stepped past her and entered the house, slowly reclaiming the space he had been forced to leave the night before. The living room felt different now, not heavy with defeat, but filled with a new sense of power and clarity. Anna stood in silence, her pride collapsing under the truth she could not deny. James told her she could take her belongings, but the house would remain his. She gathered a few bags quickly, her hands trembling as she realized the depth of her mistake. The neighbors whispered quietly among themselves, witnessing a reversal none of them had expected. James sat down in his chair by the window and watched her leave without another word. The echo of the door closing behind her was the final proof that everything had changed. He looked around the empty room, and though it was quiet, the silence felt steady and comforting. The man who had been thrown out had now taken back everything with nothing more than patience and foresight. James poured himself a glass of water and sat in peace, reflecting on how quickly life can turn. The house was his once again, not just in law but in spirit. And though the relationship was gone, he had reclaimed his dignity, his strength, and his place within the home.